Sophia had always found comfort in the quiet of her small apartment. It was her sanctuary, a place where she could escape the chaos of the world. The walls were adorned with her daughter Mia's colorful drawings, the shelves lined with books and photo albums. A cozy armchair sat by the window, overlooking the city skyline, and a soft rug covered the hardwood floor, adding warmth to the space. But tonight, the silence felt heavier than usual. The rain tapped steadily against the windows, and the occasional rumble of thunder echoed in the distance. Her Rottweiler, Rocky, lay curled up at the foot of her bed, his soft breathing a familiar and calming presence. Rocky had been with Sophia for 4 years, ever since she adopted him as a puppy. He wasn't just a pet, he was her protector, her confidant. When her husband had walked out on her and Mia 3 years ago, Rocky had been the one to stand guard over their home. When Sophia had struggled to make ends meet as a single mother, Rocky had been the one to remind her that she wasn't alone. He was more than a dog, he was family. That night, as the storm raged outside, Sophia climbed into bed, exhausted from a long day. Rocky, as always, hopped up beside her, his warm body pressing against her legs. She reached down to scratch behind his ears, smiling as his tail thumped against the mattress. "Good night, big guy," she murmured, before drifting off to sleep. Hours later, Sophia woke with a start. The room was pitch black, the storm still raging outside. Something felt off. She sat up, her heart pounding, and reached for Rocky. But he wasn't there. "Rocky?" she called softly, her voice trembling. No response. She fumbled for the lamp on her nightstand, her fingers shaking as she turned it on. The light flooded the room, and her breath caught in her throat. Rocky was standing at the foot of the bed, but something was wrong. His fur was standing on end, his body rigid. His eyes, usually warm and trusting, were fixed on the bedroom door, wide and unblinking. A low growl rumbled in his throat, a sound Sophia had never heard him make before. "Rocky, what's wrong?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. The dog didn't look at her. His gaze remained locked on the door, his growl growing louder. Sophia's stomach churned. She followed his gaze, her eyes landing on the doorknob. It was turning, slowly and deliberately. Her blood ran cold. She wasn't expecting anyone. No one had a key to her apartment except her landlord, and he wouldn't be here in the middle of the night. The door creaked open, and a figure stepped inside. Sophia's heart leapt into her throat. The man was tall, his face obscured by a hood. In his hand, he held a knife, its blade glinting in the dim light. Sophia froze, her mind racing. She wanted to scream, but no sound came out. She wanted to move, but her body refused to obey. Rocky's growl turned into a snarl, deep and menacing. The man hesitated, his eyes flicking to the dog. For a moment, no one moved. Then, with a sudden burst of speed, Rocky lunged. The man stumbled back, caught off guard by the dog's ferocity. Rocky's teeth sank into the man's arm, and he let out a cry of pain, dropping the knife. Sophia finally found her voice, shouting for help as she scrambled out of bed. The struggle was brief but intense. Rocky was relentless, his instincts kicking in to protect his owner. The man, now bleeding and panicked, managed to shove Rocky away and bolt out the door, slamming it behind him. Sophia rushed to Rocky, her hands trembling as she checked him for injuries. He was panting heavily, his fur matted with blood, not his own, Sophia realized with relief. She wrapped her arms around him, tears streaming down her face. "You saved me," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You saved me, Rocky." The police arrived soon after, alerted by a neighbor who had heard the commotion. They took Sophia's statement and launched a search for the intruder, but he was long gone. The officers praised Rocky, calling him a hero. Sophia couldn't have agreed more. In the days that followed, Sophia couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. She had always known Rocky was special, but she had never imagined he would one day save her life. She became even more protective of him, showering him with love and gratitude. But something else lingered in the back of her mind, a nagging feeling that the intruder hadn't been a random stranger. The way he had targeted her apartment, the way he had known where to find her, it felt personal. A week later, her fears were confirmed. The police called to inform her that they had caught the man. He was a former associate of her ex-husband, someone who had been stalking her for months. Her ex had given him a key to her apartment, hoping to intimidate her into dropping a custody battle over Mia. Sophia was horrified. She had always known her ex was bitter, but she had never imagined he would go this far. The police assured her that both he and the intruder were now in custody, but the betrayal cut deep. As the weeks passed, Sophia and Rocky settled back into their routine. The incident had left its mark, but it had also strengthened their bond. Rocky became even more protective, never letting Sophia or Mia out of his sight. And Sophia, in turn, made sure Rocky knew just how much he meant to her. One evening, as they sat on the couch together, Sophia looked down at Rocky, who was resting his head on her lap. She smiled, running her fingers through his soft fur. "You're my hero, you know that," she said softly. Rocky looked up at her, his tail thumping against the couch. In that moment, Sophia knew she would never take him for granted again. He wasn't just a dog, he was her guardian, her protector, her family. Months later, Sophia stood on the stage of a local community center, her heart pounding as she looked out at the crowd. She had been invited to speak at an event honoring everyday heroes, and she had chosen to share her story. That night, she began, her voice steady despite the emotions swirling inside her, "I learned what true courage looks like. It wasn't in the strength of a weapon or the size of a person. It was in the loyalty and love of a dog who refused to let harm come to me." The audience listened intently as Sophia recounted the events of that stormy night. She spoke of Rocky's bravery, of the bond they shared, and of the lessons she had learned about trust and resilience. When she finished, the room erupted into applause. After the event, a young woman approached Sophia, her eyes filled with tears. "Your story inspired me," she said. "I've been thinking about adopting a dog, and now I know I will." "Thank you." Sophia smiled, feeling a sense of fulfillment she hadn't known in years. She realized that her experience, as terrifying as it had been, had given her a new purpose, to advocate for the adoption of rescue dogs and to share the message that heroes come in all shapes and sizes. As she left the community center, Rocky trotted beside her, his tail wagging. She knelt down and hugged him, feeling a surge of gratitude. "You've changed my life, Rocky," she whispered. "And I'll never stop being thankful for you." That night, as Sophia lay in bed with Rocky curled up beside her, she felt a sense of peace settle over her. The storm had passed, both outside and within her heart. She knew there would be challenges ahead, but she also knew she could face them, as long as Rocky was by her side. And as the rain tapped gently against the windows, Sophia closed her eyes, knowing that she was safe, loved, and forever changed by the dog who had saved her life.